partnerships we've made, which have been extensive. So it's been really good to hear people excited about RCP's work and really wanting to get involved and collaborate, especially the ones that tend to focus on their work with females and children. They're excited to have someone coming in that's really working and dedicating themselves to boys. So that part's really cool.
Oh, and I think Nicole had a question about like just to further elaborate on why NGOs like to reach out to the girls instead of the boys. Like, what's behind that? Like, what's your view on that, I guess?
That's a great question. So one thing that I noticed is that the discrimination towards boys here in Chiang Mai, well in Thailand in general, is huge, especially if the boys are Hill tribe or ethnic minorities. So 100% of our boys that we work with, and I would say 100% of the boys that work in the bars are ethnic minorities, meaning they are village people. So they live up in the highlands, up in the mountains of Chiang Mai. Their parents are normally either from Burma or have always lived. And so Thai people look really down upon these people. They can tell if you're Hill tribe or if you're a minority like that. Apparently, I've asked my Thai friends, I'm like, can you really tell if these kids are of ethnic minority? And they're like, oh, absolutely, it's so easy. You can tell like that. And so the discrimination factor that these boys face on a daily basis is so intense. And they are unable to rent an apartment because they're Hill tribe. And so what they have to do, their living situation is so terrible because a landlord will essentially buy a building and will erect cardboard boxes in like this one big room. And so these boys end up renting these cardboard boxes within a building for, I mean, double what they would pay for in just a regular apartment in Chiang Mai. And the landlords do this because they know that these boys are not going to be able to find any other type of housing situation. And so you see these boys getting exploited not just in the bars, but also in their housing situation, in their working situation. And so when I saw this, and the more and more I told people about my idea and my dream to work with boys, they were like, oh, why would you do that? These boys are going to get HIV. They're going to die of AIDS. Like, why would you waste your resources on them? Go see a beach in Phuket or in Pattaya. Don't waste your time helping these boys because it's going to be worthless. And I remember, I'll never forget the one day I told this one guy that I wanted to work with boys, and he was like, you know what, Alex, if I were you, if I could, I would throw all of those kids in the river and drown them. They're no good. They have no type of, aspiration. They're lazy. They're drug addicts, and they all infect other people with HIV. And I'm like, wow, that's really intense for someone just to blatantly come out and say that these kids are worthless. So I hear that talk all the time about how these kids just have no worth. And so that's really what's set work specifically with these boys to show people, you know what, these kids do have substance abuse issues, do have a problem with alcohol and drugs, but that's because of the lifestyle that they've led for so many years. I mean, how can you imagine going with a foreigner every single night of your life and being sexually abused and then, being happy and happy-go-lucky? I mean, it just doesn't happen. These kids are masking this pain and the suffering with alcohol and drugs. And so I feel like we're a community that's putting down these boys for issues that we've never really tried to help them get through. So right now I'm really focused on boys, and I feel like that's going to continue to be my path because there's so much lack of attention towards them.
And when you're talking from like supporters in the U.S., like, I mean, I know that obviously, I mean, to be blunt, it is like gay sex that they're engaged in. Like, how do people react when you tell them in the U.S. when you're trying to raise funds or awareness, like from that crowd that's not a big fan of helping homosexuals? Like, how do you personally like respond to that and like help them realize that like we need to reach out to these boys, like despite our own biases toward.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. I think because honestly, it's not a fluffy subject. It's not a subject that I bring up and people are immediately like, oh wow, I want to get involved in fighting this. I mean, you're talking about teenage boys who have tattoos, who are rough around the edges, who smoke, who curse, who are just rough-looking kids. And so the minute you talk about teen boys who are always misunderstood, and the minute you talk about Westerners who are pedophiles and you know, are sex tourists. It's just a really uncomfortable dichotomy. People do not want to discuss that. You know, they'd rather talk about poverty, they'd rather talk about HIV/AIDS, they'd rather talk about any other subject but men essentially having sex with men. Or essentially men having sex with boys is how I like to say it. But you know, it's a really uncomfortable topic. People don't imagine that this is happening. They can't imagine that men are flying thousands of miles out of their way with the sole purpose and intention of renting a boy or many boys for a week or for a night. And so I find a lot of pushback from people when I talk about my cause and what my mission is here. And it's a lot of uncomfortable kind of, okay, let's change the subject. And, you know, it's hard because I want people to know that this is the reality. It may not be, you know, it may not be attractive. It may not be something that you want to hear, but let's call a spade a spade. I mean, this is what's happening. So, you know, there's those people that just don't want to have anything to do with it. And I find that a lot in the older conservative crowd. So, for example, my husband's crowd, you know, my husband's almost 40 and he has his, you know, real estate people and his business people, and I could never go and talk about my cause because these men would not want to hear it, and I've tried, and they don't want to hear it. So I really focus my attention on students, on young people that are passionate about getting involved in social activities, in young people and college kids. I mean, I found my biggest advocates and supporters to be young students and young professionals. It's really hard to get involved with the older crowd. But young kids and, you know, people my age in their young 30s and mid-30s, I mean, they're so passionate about a cause and they want to have an impact. So that's where I really find myself striving and people wanting to get involved. So people like you guys, I think.
Cool. And I know, I think you had a question in the email. I can't find the email.
I think but another question I have, like, what gets you through like the day-to-day grind of helping the boys? And I know there are probably a lot of moments of frustration or feeling like there's not progress, but like what like motivates you to keep pressing forward?
Definitely. By far my faith. I mean, if it weren't my faith pushing me through this, I don't know that I would be able to get through the constant struggles and the constant challenges that come my way, because, you know, there are things that you really just don't expect to happen and they just bunch up. Especially hearing, you know, with 25 kids and boys, there's always an issue. There's always a problem. There's always a kid sick. There's always a kid getting arrested. We talked about the discrimination, and so a lot of my kids get targeted by police who need to meet their monthly quota of arrests, and they'll go over to the ACA communities and just arrest my kids. So moments like that are really frustrating, and I find that if I'm not able to go back to my community of faith back at home or here, and if I didn't have that as my foundation, I think I would really be struggling. I mean, it's just, I really feel like I had a mission to come here, and I'm following that, and I know that that's going to be able to get me through it. But if I didn't have Christ, or if I didn't have God, I'd be suffering right now. You know, there's been a lot of situations that have challenged, and situations when I go out at night, you know, the Westerners, they don't want me there. They don't agree with me coming out there, and so I find a lot of struggles like that. But I have a solid community of, you know, church congregation here that helps me, so that gets me through it.